Commander L had served the Dominion for over 40 cycles. She had fought in 6 wars, commanded 3 fleets, and watched empires rise and fall across the galaxy. Her scales had turned from bright blue to deep purple with age, and her claws had taken more lives than she cared to remember. She was a warrior born and bred, and she knew strength when she saw it. When she looked at humans, she saw nothing of the sort. The diplomatic shuttle docked its station with a soft hiss of pressurized air. Elle stood at the observation window with her arms crossed, watching the human delegation emerge into the hangar bay. There were 6 of them, dressed in simple gray uniforms with minimal decoration. They moved slowly, carefully, as if the artificial gravity of the station was somehow difficult for them to manage. Her second-in-command stood beside her. He was younger than Elle by 15 cycles, eager and ambitious, with scales that still shone bright green in the light. He leaned forward to get a better look at the newcomers. "These are the humans," he asked. "They look like prey animals." Elle made a sound of agreement deep in her throat. "The Council believes they will make valuable allies against the Hollow. I have my doubts." She had read the reports, of course. Humans came from a small blue planet on the outer edge of the Orion Arm. They had achieved faster-than-light travel only 2 centuries ago, a mere blink of an eye in galactic terms. Their bodies were soft and fragile, covered in thin skin that tore easily and healed slowly. They had no claws, no fangs, no venom, no natural armor. Their senses were dull compared to most species. They could not see in darkness, could not hear the subsonic frequencies that used for long-distance communication, and could not smell the chemical signatures that other species used to track prey. By every measure that mattered, humans were weak. The leader of the human delegation was a woman named. She was small by standards, barely reaching Elle's chest even when standing straight. Her hair was brown and cut short, and her eyes were a pale gray color that reminded Elle of storm clouds. She walked with a slight limp in her left leg, favoring it with each step. Another sign of weakness, Elle thought. With such an injury would have had it healed within days. The fact that this human still carried the damage spoke volumes about their primitive medical technology. Approached the delegation and raised her hand in a gesture of greeting. "Commander L, I presume. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. The United Earth Coalition is honored to be considered for membership in the Alliance." Her voice was soft and calm, without any of the aggressive undertones that Elle expected from a military leader. She spoke like someone who had nothing to prove, which struck Elle as either supreme confidence or complete ignorance of her position. "Ambassador," Elle replied, making no effort to hide the skepticism in her tone. "I will be honest with you. The Dominion has reservations about this alliance. We have fought alongside many species over the centuries, though with their armored shells that can withstand plasma fire, the who can regenerate entire limbs in battle, the who can survive in the vacuum of space. These are warrior races. These are species that bring strength to a coalition." She paused and looked up and down with obvious disdain. "Humans bring nothing that we can see." Did not flinch at the insult. She simply nodded as if Elle had made a reasonable point. "I understand your concerns, Commander. Many species have expressed similar doubts when first encountering humanity. Perhaps we could discuss this further during the summit. I believe we may be able to change your perspective." Elle doubted that very much, but she agreed nonetheless. The Council had ordered her to give the humans a fair hearing, and she would follow her orders even if she disagreed with them. The summit began the following morning in the Grand Hall of Station. Representatives from 30 different species had gathered to discuss the threat of the Hollow, an extragalactic enemy that had already consumed 3 civilizations and showed no signs of stopping. The Hollow were relentless, numberless, and utterly without mercy. They did not negotiate, did not accept surrender, and did not take prisoners. They simply devoured everything in their path and moved on to the next world. Against such an enemy, the galaxy needed every advantage it could get. That was why the Council had extended an invitation to humanity despite their obvious limitations. Elle sat at the table and watched the proceedings with growing impatience. The representative droned on about defensive positions and fortification strategies. The ambassador discussed medical supply lines and field hospitals. The commander spoke of void warfare and ship-to-ship combat. Each species brought something valuable to the discussion, something concrete and measurable. When it was humanity's turn to speak, rose from her seat and walked to the center of the hall. She moved slowly because of her limp, and Elle heard several delegates murmur among themselves at the sight. Distinguished members of the Council began, I know that many of you have doubts about what humanity can contribute to this alliance. We are not the strongest species. We are not the fastest or the toughest or the most technologically advanced. Our bodies are fragile and ours are short. By many measures, we should not have survived long enough to reach the stars at all. She paused and looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each delegate in turn. And yet here we are. The murmuring stopped. The hall fell silent. Humans have a saying, continued. It is not the size of the dog in the fight that matters. It is the size of the fight in the dog. We may be small, we may be soft, but we have never let that stop us. On our we faced predators with claws and fangs and venom, and we killed them. We faced diseases that wiped out millions, and we cured them. We faced ice ages and meteor strikes and mass extinctions, and we survived them all. Not because we were strong, but because we refused to give up. Elle shifted in her seat. She had expected excuses, justifications, perhaps even begging. She had not expected this quiet confidence. The hollow believe they can break us, said. They believe that if they hurt us enough, we will surrender. They are wrong. Humans do not surrender. We do not know how. When we are wounded, we get back up. When we are knocked down, we rise again. When our enemies think they have won, we prove them wrong. That is what we bring to this alliance, Commander L. Not strength of body, but strength of will. And in the war that is coming, I believe that will matter more than claws or armor or fangs. She returned to her seat without waiting for a response. Elle said nothing, but for the first time she felt a small seed of doubt take root in her mind. Perhaps there was more to these humans than she had assumed. Perhaps she would need to look closer to find it. The summit continued for 3 more days, and with each passing hour, Elle found herself growing more frustrated. The human ambassador spoke well, she had to admit, had a way with words that made even the most skeptical delegates pause and consider her arguments. But words were not enough. Words did not win wars. Strength won wars, and humans had none to show. On the 4th day, Elle requested a private meeting with the human delegation. She told the council it was to discuss tactical matters, but in truth, she wanted to settle the question once and for all. If humans were as weak as she believed, she would prove it. And if they had some hidden strength, she would find it. The meeting took place in a small conference room on the lower levels of the station. Arrived with 4 members of her security detail, young men and women in simple uniforms who carried no visible weapons. Elle brought and 2 of her own guards, warriors in full battle armor with plasma rifles at their sides. The contrast was almost laughable. Ambassador, Elle began without preamble, I have listened to your speeches. I have heard your claims about human resilience and determination, but I have seen nothing to support these claims. Words are easy, proof is harder. Nodded slowly. What kind of proof would satisfy you, Commander? A demonstration, Elle said. Combat is the truest test of a species. Let one of your people face one of mine in the sparring ring. No weapons, no armor, just body against body. If your warrior can last even 5 minutes against I will reconsider my position. She expected the human to refuse. She expected excuses about different fighting styles or unfair advantages. Instead, simply turned to one of her security officers. Lieutenant Danny Cole, would you be willing to participate? A young man stepped forward. He was perhaps 30 cycles old by human reckoning, with light brown hair and friendly blue eyes. His build was lean and unremarkable, with none of the bulk that El associated with warriors. He looked like he should be teaching children or growing crops, not fighting in combat. "Happy to help, Ambassador," he said with an easy smile. El almost laughed. This was their champion, this soft, smiling boy. The humans were even more foolish than she had thought. She said, gesturing to her second, "You will represent the Dominion." Grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. He was eager for the chance to prove superiority, and El knew he would not hold back. The human would learn a painful lesson today. They moved to the station's training facility, a large room with padded floors and high ceilings designed to accommodate species of various sizes. Removed his armor and stepped into the center of the room, his scales gleaming under the bright lights. He extended his claws, each one as long as a human finger and sharp enough to cut through steel. Danny Cole removed his jacket and stepped forward to meet him. He wore only a simple undershirt and his arms were bare. El noticed several faded scars on his forearms and hands, pale lines against his skin, old wounds that had never fully healed. More evidence of human fragility, she thought. "The rules are simple," El announced. "No weapons, no killing blows. The match ends when one combatant surrenders or is unable to continue. Begin." Moved immediately, lunging forward with his claws extended. He was fast, faster than most species could track, and he aimed directly for the human's throat. It should have ended in that first second. It should have been over before it began. But Danny was not where expected him to be. The human had moved, not backward as most prey would, but sideways and forward, slipping past the deadly claws by inches. His hand shot out and struck his wrist at the joint, a precise blow that made the fingers go numb. Snarled and spun, slashing with his other hand. Again Danny was not there. He had ducked low beneath the arc of the claws, and now he was inside's guard, too close for to use his natural weapons effectively. A human fist struck his throat. Another blow landed on the soft tissue beneath his arm. A third found the gap between the scales on his side. Each impact was precise, targeted, aimed at the places where armor was weakest. Stumbled backward, gasping for air. He had taken more damage in 10 seconds than he had received in his last 3 fights combined. The human had not used strength or speed or natural weapons. He had used knowledge. He knew exactly where to strike to cause the most pain. The roared in anger and charged again, abandoning technique in favor of raw aggression. He would crush this fragile creature with sheer force if nothing else worked. Danny did not retreat. He stood his ground and watched come, his eyes calm and calculating. At the last moment he stepped to the side, caught his arm, and used his own momentum against him. Found himself flying through the air, and then he was on the ground with the human's arm locked around his throat. He could not breathe. He could not move. The human's grip was like iron, applying pressure to the exact points that would cut off blood flow to his brain. "Do you yield?" Danny asked. His voice was not even strained. He was not breathing hard. Struggled for another moment, then slapped the ground twice in the gesture of surrender. Danny released him immediately and stepped back, offering his hand to help rise. They stared at the offered hand for a long moment before accepting it. El stood in stunned silence. The fight had lasted less than 2 minutes. Her finest young warrior had been defeated by a human who looked like he should be serving drinks in a cantina. "How?" she asked when she finally found her voice. "You have no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. How did you do that?" Danny rolled his shoulders and smiled that same easy smile. "Commander, my species evolved on a world full of things that wanted to kill us. Big cats with claws and fangs, bears that could crush a human skull with one paw, wolves that hunted in packs. We had nothing to fight back with except our brains." He picked up his jacket and shrugged it on. "So we learned. We studied every predator on our world and figured out how to kill them. We learned where they were weak, where they were soft, where a small blade or a sharp stone could end them. We did not become apex predators by being stronger than everything else. We became apex predators by being smarter. Stepped forward to stand beside her officer. Has natural weapons, Commander, claws and fangs and armor. These are gifts from evolution, but gifts can make you lazy. They can make you rely on advantages you were born with instead of developing new ones. She looked at Elle with those calm gray eyes. Humans were born with nothing, so we had to earn everything. Every technique that Lieutenant Cole used was developed over thousands of years of combat against enemies that should have killed us. We have had a very long time to learn how to fight, Commander, and we have never stopped learning. Elle looked at Danny Cole, at his friendly face and easy smile, and for the first time she saw something dangerous behind the softness. I believe, she said slowly, that I may have misjudged your species. But she still did not fully understand. That understanding would come later, in a way she never expected. The sparring match had shaken Elle more than she cared to admit. She had seen defeat warriors twice his size. She had watched him break bones and tear flesh with those claws. And yet, a soft, smiling human had put him on the ground in less than 2 minutes without even breaking a sweat. But one skilled fighter did not prove anything about an entire species. The Hollow were not a single opponent in a sparring ring. They were a swarm, billions upon billions of mindless creatures driven by a hunger that could not be satisfied. They did not tire. They did not feel pain. They did not stop until everything in their path was consumed. Against such an enemy, individual skill meant nothing. What mattered was endurance. What mattered was the ability to keep fighting when everything seemed hopeless. Elle voiced these concerns to the following evening. They sat together in one of the station's observation lounges, watching the stars drift past the viewport. The ambassador had removed her formal jacket and sat with her hands wrapped around a cup of hot liquid that smelled bitter and strange. Coffee, explained when she noticed Elle looking. A drink from our. Humans consume it to stay alert during long periods without rest. You require chemical stimulants to maintain wakefulness, Elle asked. Another weakness. Smiled faintly. Perhaps, or perhaps it shows that we will use any tool available to push beyond our natural limits. Humans have never accepted the boundaries that nature gave us. We have always found ways to exceed them. Elle made a dismissive sound. Your Lieutenant Cole is skilled, I grant you that, but one warrior proves nothing. The Hollow will not send a single champion to face you in single combat. They will send millions, and they will not stop until you are dead or they are. Can your species truly endure that kind of war? Set down her cup and looked at Elle with an expression the commander could not read. Let me show you something. Lieutenant Cole, would you join us, please? Danny Cole had been standing near the door, maintaining a respectful distance during the conversation. He walked over and stood beside the ambassador's chair. Sorry. Show the commander your back. Danny hesitated for just a moment. Something flickered across his face, an emotion that Elle could not identify. Then he nodded and began to unbutton his uniform shirt. He turned around and let the shirt fall from his shoulders. Elle's breath caught in her throat. The human's back was covered in ink. A massive image stretched from his shoulders to his lower spine, rendered in black and gray with touches of deep red. It depicted a city in flames, buildings collapsing, smoke billowing into a dark sky. In the center of the image, a single human figure struggled through the destruction, carrying another figure over his shoulder. Around the edges of the scene, names were written in neat script, dozens of them, forming a border around the image of devastation. But that was not what made Elle stare. The tattoo was not drawn on smooth skin. It was layered over scar tissue, twisted and ridged flesh that spoke of terrible burns. The ink followed the contours of the scars, incorporating them into the design, making them part of the image rather than hiding them. What happened to him? Elle whispered. His voice was quiet. 7 years ago, there was a conflict on one of our colony worlds, Meridian 4, an insurgency that lasted 3 years. The central city was firebombed during the final assault. Danny was part of the rescue team sent in to evacuate civilians. She paused and looked at the image on Danny's back. The fire spread faster than anyone expected. The team was separated. Danny found himself alone in a collapsed building with 7 civilians trapped on the upper floors. The only exit was through the flames. Danny stood very still, his face turned away, saying nothing. He carried them out one by one, continued. 7 trips through the fire. By the 3rd trip his clothes had burned away. By the 5th his skin was blistering. By the 7th he could barely stand. But he kept going until every single person was safe. The burns covered 40% of his body, she said. He spent 8 months in medical care. The doctors said he would never serve again. They said the nerve damage was too severe, the scarring too extensive. Al stared at the ruined flesh beneath the ink. But he still serves. He refused to quit, said. He spent 2 years in rehabilitation, teaching himself to move again, to fight again, to ignore the pain that never fully goes away. And when he was ready, he came back. And the tattoo, Elle asked. Why would he mark himself with the image of his suffering? Danny turned around to face her. His expression was calm, but there was something deep in his eyes, something old and hard and unbreakable. Those names are the people who did not survive, he said. Friends of mine, people I could not save. I carry them with me so that I never forget why I keep fighting. He touched his chest over his heart. Humans do not hide from our pain, Commander. We do not pretend it never happened. We wear it. We carry it. We let it remind us of what we have lost and what we are fighting for. Every scar on my body is a lesson. Every mark is a memory, and every single one of them makes me stronger. He pulled his shirt back on and buttoned it closed, covering the artwork and the scars beneath. You asked if humans can endure, he said. I walked through fire 7 times in one night. I lost half my skin and most of my friends, and I am still here, still serving, still fighting. Not because I am special. Any human would have done the same. That is simply who we are. Elle sat in silence for a long moment. She thought of the warriors she had known, brave and strong and proud. She thought of how they reacted when wounded, how they sought immediate treatment, how they avoided any reminder of past injuries. To carry scars was considered shameful in her culture. It meant you had been too weak to avoid damage, too slow to heal properly. But this human had transformed his scars into something else entirely. He had made them into a monument, a memorial, a source of strength rather than shame. I begin to understand, Elle said slowly. Your people do not fear pain. We fear it, corrected gently. We are not mindless, but we do not let fear stop us. Pain is temporary, wounds heal. What matters is what you do when you are hurting. Do you give up or do you keep going? She looked at Elle with those calm gray eyes. Humans keep going, Commander. Always. No matter what it costs us. That is what we bring to this alliance. Not the strength to avoid being hurt, but the will to keep fighting after we have been hurt worse than you can imagine. Elle looked at Danny Cole, at his friendly smile and his easy posture, knowing now what lay beneath the surface. She thought of an entire species of beings like him, millions of soft, fragile creatures who had turned their weakness into an unbreakable determination. For the first time since the humans had arrived, she felt something she had not expected. She felt hope. Elle could not stop thinking about the tattoo. The image haunted her dreams that night, the burning city and the struggling figure, and the names of the dead written in neat rows around the border. She had seen terrible things in her long career. She had watched planets burn and civilizations fall, but she had never seen anything quite like what Danny Cole carried on his back. In the morning, she made an unusual request. She asked for permission to tour the human vessel that had brought the delegation to station. Seemed surprised but agreed readily. Of course, Commander, I would be happy to show you the. She is not much compared to your warships, but we are proud of her. There was docked in the station's secondary hangar, a small frigate that looked almost fragile compared to the massive dreadnoughts floating nearby. Its hull was gray and functional, without any of the elegant curves or decorative elements that marked shipbuilding. Exposed conduits ran along the corridors. The ceilings were low. The spaces were cramped and utilitarian. It looked like a ship built by people who had more important things to worry about than appearance. Led Elle through the main corridors, explaining the basic layout and function of each section. The commander listened politely, but her attention was elsewhere. She was watching the crew. The first human she noticed was a man working on a damaged power conduit near the engineering section. His name tag identified him as Pete, and he was crouched on the floor with tools spread around him, focused intently on his work. When he stood to greet the visitors, Elle saw that his right leg was not flesh and blood. It was metal and polymer, a prosthetic limb that moved with smooth mechanical precision. "Lost it in a mining accident before I joined the service," Pete explained when he noticed her looking. "Cave in, took the leg and two of my friends, spent a year learning to walk again, then signed up to see the stars. Figured I might as well make the most of what I had left." He smiled as if losing a limb was a minor inconvenience, then returned to his work. They moved on to the medical bay, where an older man named Henry was reviewing patient files on a glowing display. He walked with a cane, his left leg stiff and unwilling to bend properly. "Shrapnel," he said when Elle asked. 20 years ago during the border conflicts. The surgeon saved the leg but could not restore full function. The knee never did heal right." "Yet you continue to serve," Elle observed. Henry laughed, a warm sound that filled the small room. "My legs might be half broken, but my hands work just fine, and hands are what matter for a surgeon. I have performed over 3,000 operations since this injury. I figure I have earned the right to limp a little." In the communications center, a young woman named Santos was monitoring the ship's long-range transmissions. Elle noticed a small device attached behind her ear, a hearing implant that glowed faintly with electronic light. "Born deaf," explained without being asked. "Got the implant when I was 12. Some people thought I should not join the fleet because of it. They said I was too fragile, too dependent on technology. I decided to prove them wrong." She gestured at the complex array of equipment surrounding her station. "Now I monitor communications for an entire ship. I hear things that people with natural hearing would miss. Turns out being different is not the same as being weak." As they continued through the ship, Elle saw more and more evidence of human resilience. A pilot with a prosthetic hand that moved faster than flesh could manage. A technician with burn scars covering half her face who joked with her colleagues as if nothing was wrong. An engineer with a spinal implant that allowed him to walk after a catastrophic injury that would have left most species paralyzed for life. Every single crew member she met carried some mark of damage. Old wounds, healed breaks, replaced parts, assisted functions. And every single one of them was still working, still contributing, still serving their species with pride and dedication. "I do not understand," Elle finally said as they reached the ship's observation deck. "In the Dominion, warriors who suffer such injuries are retired with honor. They are given comfortable lives away from danger. They are not expected to continue fighting." Stood beside her looking out at the stars. "Humans see it differently. To us, an injury is not a reason to stop. It is a challenge to overcome. When we are damaged, we do not ask whether we can still serve. We ask how we can adapt to serve better." She turned to face Elle directly. "Every person on this ship has faced something that should have ended their career. Some of them have faced things that should have ended their lives. And every single one of them chose to keep going. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. Because giving up was not something they were willing to accept." Elle thought about the approach to injury and disability, the careful protection of damaged warriors, the gentle retirement to comfortable estates far from the front lines. She had always thought of it as mercy, as kindness, as respect for those who had sacrificed. Now she wondered if it was something else. Perhaps it was a failure of imagination. Perhaps they could not conceive of broken warriors continuing to fight because they had never needed to. Their natural healing, their strong bodies, their advanced medicine had always made recovery easy. They had never been forced to learn how to keep going when recovery was not possible. Humans had no such advantages. When they were broken, they often stayed broken, but they refused to let that stop them. We have a saying on Earth, continued. What does not kill us makes us stronger. Most species think that is a metaphor, a bit of poetry about personal growth. For humans, it is literally true. Every wound teaches us something. Every scar reminds us of a lesson we learned the hard way. And every time we get back up after being knocked down, we prove that we are harder to kill than our enemies thought. She looked out at the gathered fleet, the ships of 30 different species preparing for war. The Hollow think they can beat us through attrition. They think if they hurt us enough times, we will give up. They do not understand that hurting us just makes us more determined. Every human who falls will be remembered. Every human who is wounded will come back stronger. Every human who survives will fight twice as hard to honor those who did not. Elle was silent for a long moment, processing everything she had seen and heard. I believe, she said finally, that I owe your species an apology. I called you weak when I first arrived. I was wrong. Smiled the first genuine smile Elle had seen from her. You are not the first to make that mistake, Commander, and you will not be the last, but I appreciate your willingness to reconsider. That is more than many species have offered. The vote is tomorrow, Elle said. The Council will decide whether to accept humanity into the Alliance. I know, replied. Whatever the outcome, I want you to know that humanity will continue to fight the Hollow regardless, with allies or without them. That is simply who we are. Elle nodded slowly. She had made her decision. Now she just needed to convince the others. Tomorrow would determine the fate of two civilizations. And for the first time, Elle believed that humanity might be exactly what the galaxy needed. The Grand Hall of Station was filled to capacity. Representatives from 30 species had gathered for the final vote, the decision that would determine whether humanity would join the alliance against the Hollow. The air was thick with tension, and the scent of a dozen different atmospheres mixing together. Translators hummed and clicked as delegates murmured among themselves, debating the question that had consumed the summit for days. Elle stood at the podium, looking out over the assembled leaders. She saw the massive form of the ambassador, encased in chitinous armor that had never been breached. She saw the slender delegates with their 4 hearts and regenerating limbs. She saw the commanders who could survive in the void of space, whose ships had held the line against the Hollow for 3 brutal years. These were the warrior races. These were the species that had proven their strength in countless battles, and now they were being asked to accept a new ally, a species that seemed to possess none of the qualities that made a great warrior. The council moderator, an ancient being of crystalline structure that sparkled in the light, raised a limb for silence. We have heard from many voices during this summit, the moderator announced. We have debated the merits and concerns regarding humanity's application to join our coalition. Before we proceed to the final vote, do any delegates wish to offer concluding remarks? Elle stepped forward. I do. A murmur ran through the hall. The Dominion was one of the most powerful members of the Alliance. Their opinion carried enormous weight, and everyone knew that Elle had been the most vocal skeptic of human capabilities. I came to this summit with a clear view of humanity, Elle began. Her voice was strong and carried to every corner of the hall. I believed they were weak. I believed they were fragile. I believed they had nothing to offer a coalition of warriors facing an existential threat. I was wrong. The murmuring grew louder. Several delegates exchanged confused glances. I have spent the past 5 days observing humans closely, Elle continued. I watched one of their warriors defeat one of my best fighters using nothing but his bare hands and the knowledge of where to strike. I saw a human who had walked through fire 7 times in a single night, who had lost half his skin saving the lives of strangers, and who had turned his scars into a memorial that he carries with him always. I toured their ship and met crew members who had lost limbs, lost hearing, lost the full function of their bodies, and who had refused to stop serving. She paused and looked at the human delegation, sat quietly with her hands folded, watching Elle with those calm gray eyes. Danny Cole stood behind her, his friendly face composed and still. "Humans are soft," Elle said. "This is true. Their bodies break easily. They heal slowly. They lack claws and armor and venom and all the natural weapons that we consider essential for survival. But I have learned something important during this summit. Softness is not the same as weakness. Fragility is not the same as frailty." She raised her voice, letting it ring through the hall. "Humans are the only species I have ever encountered who take their wounds and transform them into strength. They do not hide from pain. They do not forget their losses. They carry them always, and they use them as fuel to keep fighting. Every scar on a human body is a lesson learned. Every wound is a promise that they will do better next time. Every loss is a debt that they intend to repay." She turned to address the delegation directly. "You are proud of your armor, Mighty. You have never known what it feels like to be truly vulnerable, but humans know. They have always been vulnerable, and instead of despairing, they adapted. They became clever. They became relentless. They became the species that looked at predators 10 times their size and figured out how to kill them anyway." She turned to the "You are proud of your regeneration, Graceful. When you are wounded, your bodies heal themselves. But humans do not regenerate. When they are broken, they often stay broken. And yet they keep fighting. They build machines to replace lost limbs. They develop technology to restore lost senses. They refuse to accept the limitations that nature placed upon them." She turned to the "You are proud of your endurance in the void, Hardy. You can survive where other species would die in moments. But humans survive in their own way, not through physical toughness but through sheer determination. They will not stop. They will not surrender. They will not give up, no matter how badly they are hurt, no matter how hopeless the situation seems." Elle looked around the hall one final time. "The Hollow believe they can defeat us through attrition. They believe that if they keep hurting us, keep killing us, keep destroying everything we love, we will eventually break. And perhaps they are right about some of us. Perhaps there are species in this hall who would surrender if the cost became too high." Her voice dropped to a near whisper, but it still carried to every ear. "Humans will never be among them. Hurting humans does not make them weaker. It makes them angry. It makes them determined. It makes them more dangerous than any species I have ever encountered. And that is exactly what we need in the war that is coming." She raised her hand in the gesture of alliance. "The Dominion votes to accept humanity into the coalition, not because they are strong in the ways we understand, but because they possess a strength that none of us have ever needed to develop. The strength to keep fighting after they have been broken. The strength to turn their pain into power. The strength to never, ever give up." The hall was silent for a long moment. Then the ambassador raised an armored limb. "The collective agrees." The delegate stood. "The Federation agrees." One by one, the other species added their voices. The crystalline beings of the outer rim, the gas giants who lived in the clouds of massive planets, the silicon creatures who swam through molten rock. Every single delegate voted in favor. The vote was unanimous. Rose from her seat and walked to the center of the hall. She looked small and fragile among the towering aliens, surrounded by claws and armor and natural weapons that could have ended her life in an instant. She had never looked more dangerous. "On behalf of the United Earth Coalition, I thank you for this honor," she said. "We will not let you down. When the Hollow come, they will find humanity standing beside you. and they will learn what every predator on our learned across thousands of years of bloody history. She smiled, and there was something fierce in that expression, something that reminded Elle of Danny Cole's eyes when he spoke about the names on his back. They will learn that humans are not prey, we are not victims, we are not the soft, weak creatures they think we are. We are survivors, we are fighters, we are the species that refuse to die no matter what the universe threw at us. Her voice rose, filling the hall. And we will teach the Hollow that lesson as many times as necessary, until they understand, until they remember, until they are gone. The fleet launched 3 days later. 30 species united against a common enemy, their ships forming a wall of fire and steel across the stars. And at the front of that formation, small and soft and absolutely unbreakable, flew the ships of humanity. The Hollow had no idea what was coming for them.